sickening sense of how could this possibly happen, and you try to wrap your mind around it and comprehend it. You can't. It's just impossible. And even the ways that we typically try to understand events like this through psychology, and they say the man was disturbed, things like that. It certainly was. Or war, you can understand the cultural and political tensions and things like that, or a natural disaster. This goes way beyond that. Even a very sick, mentally ill individual could never, just because of that, commit a crime so horrendous. So you're thrown back on religious concepts. That's the only way to understand it. And our faith teaches us that there are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world. And this was a time when the forces of evil were manifest in a very dramatic way.
And how are you helping your parishioners? I mean, how do you comfort them? It's one of those situations where you want to tell people it's going to be all right, but of course it isn't going to be all right.
No, of course it's not going to be all right. I think that's a disservice to say everything's going to be all right. I think the one thing we do is we draw people together, so there's a sense of community and caring, and that's the first stage in any kind of healing, because there's a tremendous amount of fear and anxiety that can accompany this. So the fact that we're all together in a loving community is very comforting. But beyond that, people ask, try to make sense of it. How can this possibly happen? And so we try to, at the same time, remind them of the teachings of the faith, that there is good and evil in the world, that God is completely good, God opposes evil, and in the end, God is stronger than the forces of evil, and the forces of evil will be purged from the world, and that is our hope. So we look to God for God's strength, healing, guidance, knowing that God is all good and all loving, and that's a very powerful thing. If we don't have that, then it's just senseless mayhem, and there can be no healing from that. Just the opposite. There's more alienation and fear and senselessness, and that's something that it's very hard to live with, that kind of belief,
Well, thank you very much, Reverend Moore. So there can be a great hole at moments like this when you do not have faith.
Thank you.
Well, as the Reverend Moore was saying, trying to understand how this could happen is a question for people around the world right now. We want to look at how a person could carry out such an extreme and unthinkable act of violence. It's hard for anyone to fathom. And as memorials are being held around the nation today, our next guest is going to help us make sense out of what could lead a person, a human being, to carry out such an act of gross violence against children.